Greetings, everyone. This is Jed Schlackman. I'm a holistic counselor, a spiritual energy healer, and all-around metaphysical explorer. This current presentation that I'm offering now covers the topic of the manipulation of human consciousness and how that relates to our spiritual evolution. Pretty hefty topics there, but I think we can learn a lot by exploring them. My interest in those topics goes back about 15 to 20 years, and this relates back to the 1990s, for those of you that can remember that era. And around the middle to later part of that decade, I was drawn toward exploring a lot of information related to spirituality, parapsychology, also extraterrestrial phenomena, and conspiratorial topics. So the hidden and suppressed information, not only from the spiritual and metaphysical, but also from this everyday 3D reality. Some people call it the Matrix that we're experiencing here on Earth. Many of you have probably seen the movie The Matrix, the movie trilogy actually, and a number of years before that trilogy appeared, before those movies were produced and came into the theaters, there was a series of esoteric books which also carried the title Matrix. Those books were among the information, the sources that I was drawn to explore back beginning in the 1990s. Now that was a time when the internet, the World Wide Web, was really beginning to grow and take off. Before that time, people that were exploring these topics and exchanging information would usually be doing that through other means, not through the internet. It was just beginning to become something that you could research on the internet around the time that I was beginning to look into it. I attended college and graduate school in the 1990s, and I was someone that was interested in computers and the development of those technologies at that time. Some of you may remember the era of searching for information through networks via Gopher, G-O-P-H-E-R, like the animal. So that was a protocol similar to how we have now the hypertext transfer protocol that the World Wide Web uses. Well, back then to search you would use a text-based protocol, which was Gopher. And then shortly thereafter the graphic interfaces began to be developed. You had NCSA Mosaic, one of the early web browsers, Mozilla's Netscape, then of course Microsoft became prominent with Internet Explorer. So this was in the mid to late 1990s. At that time there were different websites coming online that were presenting a lot of this esoteric type of information, New Age type spiritual teachings, information about extraterrestrials, about secret societies, things like that. And one of the people that was putting a lot of that information out there on the internet around that time was a gentleman who uses the pen name Val Valerian. He was the author, or more accurately compiler, of the Matrix series of books. So in the series of books that he created, he had some interesting titles for those books, and one of them was called The Psychosocial, Chemical, Biological, and Electromagnetic Manipulation of Human Consciousness. That book even inspired an album by an underground hip-hop group called Jedi Mind Tricks. So for those of you that are into hip-hop, you may have come across this particular phrase there. Valerian himself became interested in all of these esoteric topics due to his personal experiences. In part of his life, he was someone interested in spiritual and metaphysical phenomena, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, those psi phenomena. And in his everyday worldly life, you could say, in his career, he served in the military. He became an intelligence officer in the U.S. Air Force, and his name there was not Val Valerian. I believe it was John Grace. So later on he used this pen name, which is actually a name that he derived from one of his other incarnations in ancient Rome. So it wasn't an invented name per se, it was a name he recalled from another incarnation. Anyway, in his military service, he became confronted with the reality that certain factions within the U.S. government were using technologies that had come from extraterrestrial sources. So some very advanced technologies that the public was not aware of. And he began to research the UFO and extraterrestrial contact phenomena. And that, of course, led into other related subjects about suppressed science, suppressed history, secret societies, and global control cabals, things like that. He put all this information together in these dissertation-like booklets, and those became the Matrix series. At this point in time, in the year 2015, he's no longer offering those books for sale to the public. You may be able to find scanned copies of some of them on the internet that people have kind of illicitly posted in different forums. But at this point, you can't actually buy the books anymore from their source. Now, I used the title there about the manipulation of human consciousness, which brings the attention to some of the material I wish to discuss now. Human consciousness can be influenced from multiple levels. It can be influenced chemically, which includes by the foods we eat, the water we breathe, the water we drink and the air we breathe, and also by different drugs and herbs and things like that. So those would be chemical level influences that affect how our consciousness is functioning. It can also be influenced electromagnetically. So the electromagnetic spectrum includes a vast range of frequencies of vibrational stimuli. That could be radio waves, X-rays, microwaves, infrared light, ultraviolet light, the color spectrum, sound frequencies. So all those different frequencies, all those wavelengths of vibration can affect how our brain and our consciousness are functioning. This is not something that's inherently positive or negative, it's just the reality of how things work. Of course, anyone who becomes aware of these particular phenomena can intentionally use them to influence consciousness, and that could be used in a positive or negative way, in a benevolent way or a manipulative way. Of course, in the society that we live in, the manipulative forces often tend to be more prominent. We just discussed the electromagnetic manipulation. There is also psychosocial manipulation of our consciousness. And this is something that the field of psychology is very much involved with. My background as a therapist begins with studying psychology. That's my undergraduate major. In psychology, there are different paradigms, different fields of psychology, focusing on different aspects of psychological functioning, of how our personality develops, and things like that. One area is the behavioral or cognitive behavioral area of psychology. There you learn about psychological conditioning. There's operant conditioning and there's classical conditioning. All the things that use some form of reward or punishment to influence human behavior. Now we can take that to a deeper level and go into the subconscious and unconscious factors that are influencing human psychology, which is not completely separate from the behavioral level, because the behavioral patterns that are being programmed or imprinted then get stored on a subconscious level. In public relations and advertising, in marketing, in fields where people are trying to sell things, these psychological theories are often applied in order to appeal to people on a level where their critical thinking won't interfere and they'll be more easily influenced. Hypnosis also uses these ideas, since hypnosis is designed to access the subconscious levels of the mind. In doing that, you're helping the conscious critical mind, the analytical mind, relax and step to the side so that you can more directly access the subconscious. We've already covered a few different ways that our consciousness can be influenced, and I want to help us consider how much of this is happening without us being aware of it. If we think about the chemical level, people are consuming foods and drugs, things on a chemical level, where they're not necessarily conscious of how it's affecting the operation of their consciousness. There are things that are added to the water, or things injected into our body, things that are in some way placed into foods that affect our nervous system, that affect our brain chemistry, and so on. One example of this is fluoride being added to the drinking water in many places. This topic is one that has been looked into by many researchers over the last several decades, and if you look at all the independent, unbiased, or unmanipulated research, you'll find very strong evidence that there are many negative effects of fluoride being placed in the water. Val Valerian actually produced a whole what's the word for this? Kind of a bibliography or annotated list of references showing all this research that confirms fluoride is something that's harmful for human physical and psychological health. There are actually hundreds of studies showing a variety of negative effects, and some of these are from very respected, prominent institutions. The evidence has actually become even more strong and prolific since the time that he compiled that. And now there are many places around the world that are starting to ban or reverse their policies about putting fluoride in the water because so many people are becoming aware that it's harmful. Well, if it's harmful, how come people didn't seem to know about that originally? Clearly someone had an agenda to place this potentially toxic substance into the drinking water. There are other examples of things that have a harmful effect on our health. Things like MSG and aspartame that are added to foods. Those are called by some people excitotoxins because they overstimulate nerve cells and they can therefore damage those cells. There's also the topic of GMO foods, the topic of vaccines, and in the Matrix books, Valerian actually compiled a lot of research on these types of topics, kind of putting all this together to look at the paradigms that are in place or in some way influencing our civilization, often in a negative or manipulative way. When we look at these things, sometimes people get upset, sometimes people are angry that this is being done, sometimes people are in denial. They don't want to accept the possibility that there are manipulative, controlling forces that do not have the best interest of human beings in mind. We can kind of expand our perspective, though, more to a spiritual way of looking at things. From that perspective, everything that seems negative or challenging is actually an opportunity. On some level, as spiritual beings, we've chosen to incarnate, to put our consciousness into these human forms in this physical reality, to have certain types of experiences, to deal with and overcome certain kinds of challenges. So the greater the challenge, the greater the reward, the greater the opportunity to evolve and empower ourselves. So rather than being angry and playing the victim role, we can look at this as a learning opportunity, a chance to become more self-aware, more empowered, more ready to take the next step on an evolutionary journey of consciousness. That's the context or framework from which I prefer to explore and observe these matters. I would encourage those viewing this to look at things from that higher perspective as well. That allows us to be more neutral, to be more open to observe and see things clearly as they are, without trying to filter things from our awareness. For those that would like to see the Matrix books, this is one of them. This is the one that refers to the manipulation of human consciousness, and it has a rather curious cover. You'll see things like AGA accepted. That's a reference to the fluoride issue, as the American Dental Association has been very prominent even to the present day in promoting fluoride as something beneficial. You will also see a fractal design. You'll see a picture of John F. Kennedy with a target, like a rifle scope, pointed at him, which is curiously right next to a picture of George Herbert Walker Bush, an American politician who was head of the CIA for a while and who many people think had involvement in the JFK assassination. There's also an Om symbol. You'll see a picture of the brain, a yin-yang symbol, E equals MC squared, a DNA spiral, a picture of a UFO, of the gray ETs. So some interesting juxtaposition of phenomena there. And if we start to expand our perspective, we start to see there's some overlap and interrelationships between some of these topics. Now, in our present era, there's a lot more information available about these subjects. So the internet is kind of a game-changing phenomena in that it makes a lot more information a lot more easily accessible to massive amounts of people. So in the 90s, back around the time I started looking into this, a book like Matrix from Val Valerian might have a few thousand people reading it, whereas now you can go on the internet and find a YouTube video by someone such as David Wilcock, and there may be over 1 million views on that video. Interestingly, in the days when I was researching things from the website that sold the Matrix books, on that website, which is still up in a more limited form, it's truefax.org, trufax.org. There is a forum there, a discussion forum called the Conscious Evolution Forum, and one of the people who happened to be participating or contributing to that forum was David Wilcock. This was back around 1999, and Wilcock had his own website at that time called Ascension 2000. His current and more well-known website is divinecosmos.com, but he was already publishing a lot of his knowledge and his findings already before the year 2000. Since a lot more information is becoming available, there is in some sense an awakening process happening across a certain segment of humanity. So this is a very interesting, a very dynamic time to be alive on this planet. And many hidden realities, many hidden truths and information are coming to the surface, are coming to light. There's also the phenomena of lots of conflict and infighting among the various negative-oriented groups and factions that have been manipulating and controlling humanity. We can observe and learn from all of this that's happening. I think it's a great opportunity to do that. Once we become aware of things, we are empowered to make changes for ourselves. A simple example would be becoming aware of the content of the food that you eat. If your food is full of processed chemicals, of different additives that could be harmful to your health, you have a choice to change what you're eating. This goes not only for food, but also for information, for social interactions. We can choose what media to pay attention to, what newspapers or websites to read, what television programs or movies to watch. We can choose what friends to hang out with, what groups to associate with. There are many things that we have the power to choose, which will affect the path of our life, which will affect the energetic state that we are able to maintain. Coming back to the different levels of manipulation or influence of human consciousness, there was a reference to the electromagnetic level, which is actually becoming even more prominent now with all the wireless technologies that are present. For those that are curious about how some of those technologies may be affecting us, there's a movie and a website called Take Back Your Power, which speaks to how these EMFs, electromagnetic fields, are causing significant health issues and other issues affecting our privacy, our safety, etc. If you have a cellular phone, if you have a smartphone and things like that, you may not think about how those could be affecting you in some subtle ways. Many people don't know that there's research showing a dramatic increase in brain tumors among people using those devices. When you buy your cell phone, you're not told that. You don't hear it from the government, from the major media outlets. So you have to search out that information yourself. On the psychosocial level, we can look at all the different institutions of our civilization and consider whether they're empowering us or disempowering us. We can examine the educational system and see if it's preparing us to be creative and critical thinkers, or if it's just teaching us to conform to authority, to perform certain routines or roles to fit into society. We can examine religions, political movements. We can look at any aspect of society and see how it's influencing our individual consciousness. Is it making us more conscious, more compassionate? Is it helping us become more independent and self-sufficient? Or is it fostering some form of dependency? These are important questions to examine. Then on the spiritual level, we can question whether something is supporting and encouraging us to connect with a higher level of consciousness, or if it's discouraging us from that. Religions, historically, have often included components that discourage people from developing their own individual spirituality and spiritual awareness. This doesn't mean that they're all bad, that they're all negative, that there's nothing of value in a religion. It just means we have to have our eyes open, our minds open, to consider what may be beneficial and what may be not when we're examining any type of teaching or organization. In our society, money is something that's often a focus of importance for people. In many segments of society, people judge each other by their income, by their house, their car, their status in those ways. However, if we're looking at things spiritually, we can remind ourselves that none of those things actually come with us once we leave this particular physical body. It's really all an illusion. We're here as human beings for this experience, and we learn from that experience. We carry that experience and wisdom with us as our consciousness continues on into other realms, other dimensions, other forms of co-creation. This is something that we can all realize and apply for ourselves so that we can take a step forward on our spiritual journey. If we become overly attached or addicted to things that our society tells us are important, we kind of get stuck. We get attached to that and preoccupied with it, and we don't really develop our spirituality as much. Remember, where you place your attention, you're placing your energy, you're developing your consciousness in that particular way. We can focus our time and energy on pursuits that are very simple and material, or we could focus more of our time and energy on things that develop our consciousness. We can activate psychic abilities, we can activate healing abilities, we can study universal principles, metaphysical laws, things of that nature. There's no right or wrong about it. We all go through these different steps and stages on our journey. Just as a child goes through kindergarten before they come to first grade, to second grade, to third grade, all the way up through college. In our spiritual journeys, we go through different steps and stages as well. and the earlier, more basic ones provide a foundation for the later, more advanced stages. I would like to go back to the mentioning of the Matrix books once more. You got to see the cover of Matrix 3, which deals with the biological, electromagnetic, chemical, and psychosocial manipulation of human consciousness. Another book in that series, Matrix 4, has a very unusual title, which is called the Equividium, if that's even the correct pronunciation. And in this book, a lot of esoteric paradigms about our species, about metaphysics, about life in our galaxy are examined. So it covers a lot of discussion of extraterrestrial groups, of their agendas, of the development of consciousness. It speaks of the paradigm of service to self versus service to others, which you could look at in terms of light side and dark side orientation from a spiritual or metaphysical perspective. This book goes into the history of Earth, ancient civilizations such as Atlantis and Mu or Lemuria. It speaks about some of the prominent extraterrestrial factions that have been visiting and interacting with this planet. Now, this information comes primarily from the 1990s, around that era, and we've been able to learn a lot more since then. A lot more people have come forward. You can visit websites like Project Camelot, where many whistleblowers and contactees and people with insight into these subjects have shared their perspective or their take on things. Then there was a 5th volume of the Matrix series, and that one is called The Quest for the Spirit. And that is really the highest level of perceiving or understanding things, looking at it from a spiritual level. If we just get bogged down in looking at the matrix, the physical reality, how things are manipulated on that level, we may forget that we're, in a sense, immortal, infinite spiritual beings. And we're here for the experience, for the learning, mastery, and wisdom that we can gain from participating in these realities. In that book, Val Valerian actually publishes the writings of a friend of his, so it's really one person who's presenting a lot of information, and it's not even the named author of the volume who's presenting that information. In there you'll learn about major extraterrestrial groups that are important to the history of our planet. You'll learn about many different spiritual and metaphysical topics related to polarities and balance. You'll learn about the principles that people refer to as the law of attraction, the law of allowance, the power of intention, things like that. So it's a lot of interesting material, and it's something that gave me a lot of insight as I was exploring all of these subjects and trying to get a greater understanding of the reality that I'm here existing in, and how that reality has shaped my life and how it influences other people around us, how everyone has, in a sense, been programmed to be who they are in their particular human persona. Again, this is something that empowers us as we examine it. As someone who counsels and coaches people to make positive changes in their lives, I'm not here to judge who anyone has been up until now. I'm not here to, there's a word I'm trying to come up with now, it's condemn, but people have a lot of connotations of what condemn means. In a way, it's to reject something. So I'm not here to reject anything that exists. Everything in existence has a purpose. It offers an opportunity for experience, for learning, for mastery and wisdom. If I examine something in the human society and condemn it, the condemnation is not really to reject it, it's to say, I believe there's a more enlightened reality that we can create. Now, for everyone involved, that's their choice of what reality they wish to create for themselves. Each of us can only share what we know, what we believe, what we have to present from our own perspective. And creation is inclusive of all perspectives. Everyone who exists is a part of creation, a part of the creator or the creative essence itself. So there's nothing that needs to be removed or erased from creation. All we're really doing is shifting our consciousness so we bring our focus to a new experience. But those other potential experiences and potential realities all do exist. We're just not focusing our own attention on them anymore, so we're not experiencing them anymore. This is, in my view, the beauty of creation itself. That every being is free to exist, to create its own experience. And the Creator doesn't block or disallow anything to exist. You may have heard the phrase, it's all good. Well, a simpler way to put it would be to say it's all God. Everything is a part of that creative intelligence coming into manifestation. Even looking at the word matrix, matrix comes from the Latin root where we get the word matter and mother. Matter is physical reality, so it's the densest layer of energy where we can perceive things in a slowed down, externalized manner. That's considered to be a feminine aspect, whereas the Father, the masculine aspect, is the spiritual source. Ancient civilizations would often use the sun to represent that masculine essence, the creative spirit. So it's the light or energy of the sun that shines down to the earth to bring life to the earth. So spirit transfers itself down toward the physical level of reality to create life. It's a nice way to look at things. It's a very simple archetypal or metaphorical way of understanding creation. I hope you have gotten a few interesting ideas or insights from what I've had to share. For those who would like to learn more about these subjects, there's a lot of information available on the internet. For those seeking guidance or support for healing issues, I can often assist and give guidance in those matters. My website is www.phinsights.com. That's www.phinsights.com. www.phinsights.com. And finally, to close out this presentation, I will be showing you the cover of the Matrix 5 book, the one about the quest for spirit. And on the cover of this book, there's an illustration showing what we might refer to as the oversoul or higher self, and the streams of energy coming down from that source, coming down to create incarnations upon the earth. So that's part of what you see in this image. It's been a pleasure to share with you. I wish you all a good day. Namaste.